Welcome to American Gypsy Podcast. I'm your host, Gypsy, and today we have a special guest, Kim Beam, and she is an intuitive coach, published author, and inspirational speaker. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Hello, hello, how are you?
Good. Nice to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here.
So, what does it mean to be an intuitive coach, and how did you get
Yeah.
started in this path?
Yeah, so this path has been a bumpy road that I think all of us when we're walking into our intuition that we're like, what am I doing? So it really started when I was really little and I found my way. Anything that I found in like the spirit world, I found my way because I was trying to follow spirit and I was trying to follow what spirit was saying and I was listening really, really hard to spirit. And I have created some really tight relationships with spirit in different forms along the way. Um, and so I was trying really hard to hear clearly. And it wasn't until I found somebody who came alongside as my mentor and I could go to them and be like, I'm hearing this, this, and this. And they would say, I agree with this and this, but not that.
Mm.
Or I would say, I'm sensing this. And they're like, yeah, no. Or I would ask about a boy. I always asked about boys. And I was like, what about this boy? And he would always be like, don't ask me about boys. I don't answer about relationships. He's like, don't ask me. I don't know. You know, I don't know these things. And so I found that I really didn't start to trust my intuition and really handle doubt well until I had somebody who I could come alongside and say, how do you do this? Like what games do you play to try out different things to know where to go and how to do it? And so he was somebody who was super intense and he would just go up to people in parking lots and be like, I have a word for you. And then he would just deliver it right there in a parking lot. And people would just be like, blink, blink, blink. And then they would be like totally amazed because he would just read their mail for them right there, like on the street. And he would be like, here's your stuff. And he was always encouraging me just to like walk up to people and be like, let me read your mail. And I was like, that's not comfortable for me. Like, that's not the way I did it. He loved it. We have these convenience stores around here called Wawa, and
Mm.
he would go into Wawa and he said it was his biggest place that he would find people and know that he had to give somebody a message. And I would just be like, okay. And I would go into Wawa and I wouldn't see anybody. Like nobody would shine, nobody would pop out, nobody would be my person. And he's like, you need to work on this. And I realize now that that's not my gift. It was his
Mm.
gifting with spirit. It wasn't my gifting with spirit. I now, whenever anybody comes up to me and I say, hey, I'm an intuitive coach, I'm an intuitive, they're always like, one, what does that mean? And I'm like, it means I read the energy. I read your energy. I feel what's possible and what's not possible at this time period, what doors are opening for you if you wanted to go in those avenues. If there's something specific you have a question about, I can tell you what energy is saying about that. But then I also ask for permission. And so when they're like, oh, what are you getting? I'm like, do I have like, there's like implicit permission where somebody's like, here's $20, tell me what you think, right? That's clear. I have
Mhm.
permission, right? But if I just walk up to somebody and I'm like, here, like, if you're at an expo, right, and I hand you a bag and you stick your hand in the bag and pull out a card, you're giving me permission to read it, right? Like you've done the action. But if I just
Yeah.
walk up to somebody and say I'm an intuitive and they're like, well, what does that mean? This doesn't mean I read energy. I then say, is it okay if I read the energy? Like I ask for
Mm.
permission to do it. I don't just like put my brain in that headspace. And I've seen people be worried. They're like, are you reading me right now? I'm like, no, you didn't give me permission. I'm not stepping into
Mm.
that for you. And so it's been a really bumpy road for me until I found somebody that came alongside and showed me this is how you do it. And this is how you weigh what you're
Mm.
hearing. And this is how you like take it, but you hold it lightly. Yeah, this is the
Mm.
message, and the message is really, really important, and you really, really want it. But like Esther, do you know Esther Hicks, the
Yes, I
law of
do.
attraction?
I
So,
love
like, you know
Esther.
how she always says, if you're swimming upstream, there's nothing good up there. You just need to
Yeah.
float down. Or when you're holding on to something really tightly, you're holding on to the wrong side of the stick, right?
Yeah.
And so, um, I have learned that when I really, really want something, you're pushing it away, you're giving it resistance, you're doing all the things. And so he was somebody that was like, Kim, you got to hold it lightly. You have to hold it
Mm,
lightly. Like, this is the word, this is the promise, this is the hope, but you have to hold it lightly. And you don't know when. Like, don't ask me when. I don't know when. And that's what everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to know when. I'm like, I don't know. In spirit, it's happening now. It's not happening now in the physical, but spirit says it's happening now. Like, I don't know when is. When could be 5 years from now, right? Like, there was a moment when I really, really wanted this job. Super
mm,
wanted this job, and the job was starting in August. And I really wanted it. It was to be a like therapist on a school's campus, on a boarding school's campus.
mm,
And I really wanted this job. I didn't get the job. But I asked to see a snail and a caterpillar like in the next day as like a sign that the job was coming. I got a job as a school therapist 2 years later. It's just sort of fell in my
mm,
lap, but it wasn't the job I wanted, but it was the job I got.
mm,
And so was spirit wrong? No. Was the caterpillar and snail appropriate? Absolutely. It just wasn't for the job I thought I wanted. It
mm.
was for a different job.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
yeah, that does.
Yeah.
And it probably happened for a reason that you probably
Yes.
understand now.
Yes, I totally understand why I didn't get it. And on top of that, right? So you asked
Mm,
me, what does an intuitive coach do? As an intuitive
mhm,
coach, I help people tap into their intuition and trust it. Your left brain is super strong. It's your ego, it's your science mind, this is all, am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
yeah.
Okay, it's all bullshit. Everything
Mm,
you're thinking and feeling that you can't touch, that you can't see, that you don't know, that you're feeling is energy, that's all bullshit, Kim. Stop listening to it
mm,
because it's just getting you in trouble. And then there's the right side of my brain that's like, but the possibility, it feels like flowers and it feels like hope and it feels like joy and it makes me cry because I'm so excited by all the possibility. And my left brain is like, you do realize that you are still struggling with these things, that some things haven't changed at all, that nothing is different in your life, and you're stepping out into the unknown. And it's like jumping off a cliff. Can we please stop doing this? And my right brain is like, no, but there's hope and there's joy and you can help so many people. And like, this is exciting. And so,
mm,
as an intuitive coach, I help people to handle that argument between the two sides of your brain, where your left ego brain, science mind is like strong and vibrant, and your right brain is like, but I'm sensing these things and I don't know what to do with it. And I'm really hopeful for these things. And these things make me happy and they make me
mm,
joyful and they give me hope. And these are the things that I need. And my left brain is like, you're a child, grow up.
mm.
And so it's just a matter of like helping people work through that difficult water, right? That bumpy
Mm,
road of how do you trust and know that what you're hearing is accurate,
mm.
even if you
And
don't see it for 3 years?
what do you feel like are some common blockages that you see in people that are getting in their way of enhancing their intuitive abilities?
Well, we are a society that loves to overthink,
Mm, yeah.
right? So if you get a hit, it's okay. So science has shown, you might have already talked about this on your podcast already, but science has shown that you have your energy field. They can now measure your energy field and it goes out 3 feet in front of you.
Mm,
I learned this from Heather Alice Shea. It goes out 3 feet in front of you, right? And it's widest at your heart. And it comes up in a little cone shape up at the top of your head. So it kind of has like a donut hole. And the bottom also has a donut hole. So you're kind of like a 3 foot donut, right? With the
mm,
widest part at your heart.
yeah.
And that's your energy field. And they can measure that. Your energy field is way, way bigger than that. Like the field is huge. And that's
Mm,
why, like, twins who are on opposite sides of the world and something bad happens, the other twin knows it immediately, right? Like,
yeah.
that's how, like, the energy field's way bigger than that. But science has only figured out the 3 feet.
Mm,
And so it comes into your heart, it goes up to your head and goes down to your gut. And that takes 3 seconds.
mm,
And so when the people say, don't tell me what you think is the answer, right? Don't tell me, like, don't think, just tell me your answer. Don't think, just tell me your
mm,
answer. The first answer that pops in is the correct answer. The first answer that
Mhm.
pops in is your intuitive answer because it came in, went up, went down, 3 seconds later, boom, that's your answer. But then your left brain takes over and goes, no, that was dumb. Well, why'd you say that? That's not even your favorite. Like if I asked you to think of an animal right now, right? The first animal that pops in your head is one animal. And then as you think
Mhm.
about it, you're like, why am I thinking about this other animal? Like, why did you think that animal? That animal's not,
Mhm.
right? That animal's not even your favorite animal. Why'd that animal pop in your head? Like that animal's useless animal. Like that's a dumb animal. Why'd you think of that animal? Right?
Yeah.
Now, for all of you listening, the answer to the question that is the animal that just popped in your head is, how do you think of your intuition? So, Gypsy, what was the first animal that popped in your head?
A tiger.
Right.
Random.
So then your intuition is super fierce and it's
Mm.
brave and it's strong and it leads the way and it is a trailblazer, right? And
Mm.
it's also something to be slightly afraid of because it's brought you into places that you're like, oh no, what am I doing here? Right. But it's a tiger, so it's fierce and it's independent, right?
Yeah.
And so, like anybody who's listening, go look up the spiritual animal of the first thing. But when you had tiger pop in your head, was there a second animal that popped in right after?
No, not really.
Not really. Okay. So, but that also might be because you're intuitive, right? And you're like, oh, the
Yeah.
tiger popped in, that's the first answer. For some people, they might have been like, I had somebody at a convention once ask me, I had a cat pop in. And she goes, but I'm not a cat person, I'm a dog person.
Mm.
She's like, I don't understand why I have a dog come in. Like, I'm a dog person. Why did I see a cat? And I said, well, that's because you're answering the question that you didn't know was a question. You're
Mm.
answering the question, how do you feel about your intuition? And you're timid around your intuition. Unlike a tiger, a domestic cat is like, they have the reputation of being like standoffish and like
Mm.
shy and judging and sometimes like, antagonistic. And that's how you think of that for that person. That's how she thought of her intuition as shy and hard to reach and hard to read and hard to get close to. I said, if you saw the dog first, your intuition is your best friend and somebody who's totally loyal. And your intuition is something you completely trust and is going to carry you through and is going to be right at your side for every decision. And like those two
Mm.
things are polar opposite of each other.
It's funny. That's pretty accurate. I felt like I strengthened my intuition by ignoring it because I didn't really understand it and realizing that I ignored it later on. My intuition has been so many times where it's told me, I might need this or I need to do this. And I'm like, that doesn't really make sense. I don't need that right now or something like that.
Right.
And then later on, I realized why I needed that. And so I started strengthening it that way. Now I follow my gut feeling.
Yes.
Um, so that's kind of how I realized what is intuition and how to strengthen it. And then um, that just changed my thought process and how I approach my decision making, basically.
And there's a level of trust with your intuition that comes in when you
Mm.
start giving
Yeah.
people, not just for yourself. I think it's harder to read for yourself than it is for other people. But
Mm.
there is a
Yeah.
level of trust you have to have with your intuition when you start saying things to other people about what you're sensing for them.
Yeah.
So I've given a gazillion intuitive readings, right? Like I
Mm.
can't even count how many I've given. I've given so many. But there are some that have stood out. So there was a college professor that I had who was applying for from an adjunct position to a full professorship, right? There's a
Mm.
big difference between being an adjunct and being a full professor. And so
Right.
he was going from one to the other. And I happened to be in his practice class that he gave to the panel of judges who were like judging whether or not he was going to get the position. And he was
Mm.
somebody that I had like a close enough relationship to that I was able to text him later and be like, hey, just so you know, my gut says, I was like, just so you know, you're going to get the position. Like, you're going to get hired. And he was like, how do you know? And I was like, my gut says you're going to. Like, my gut just says it. I didn't
Mm.
say I'm an intuitive at that point. Like, I wasn't owning it the way I am now. I was like, I just know that you're like, it's going to happen. And so it didn't happen. they gave it to somebody else. And I
Mm.
was like, I stepped out, I gave the word, right? I said it, and then
Mhm.
it didn't happen. And then I was like kind of pissed at spirit for having me step out and say it when like
Mm.
it didn't happen. And I was like, what the heck? Like now I look foolish. You like I know that I know that I know he's getting the position, even though he didn't get it. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And the summer rolled forward, and as I was lamenting this I always have these conversations in my bathroom for some reason. As I was lamenting this in my bathroom, like, I don't understand, I heard the summer's not over yet.
Mm.
And I was like, oh. I'm like, okay, I'll chill out and I'll watch and see. So I happened to be on campus for this like returning student leadership kind of like meeting with one of the professors to discuss, I don't know, what we thought about the upcoming year and like things that were their goals versus our goals. And like it was just like a get together with students to make sure we're all on the same page with each other and make sure that what we wanted and what they wanted were aligned. So we were in this meeting. As we were sitting in this meeting, she gets a phone call. She takes the phone call. She steps in the hallway. She comes back in and she says, just so you know, she names the professor and says he's going from adjunct to full professorship. We just offered him the position and he's accepted it. And it was like a week before classes started.
Mm.
And I was like, yes, saw that coming.
When did you like, from the first time you felt like you can read energy, um, to actually like, providing the service, how did you know, like, how did you build that trust, I guess?
Yeah, there are two things. So there's a story in there where I, for a while there, believed I was going to marry this man. And I would hear, because one of the things I learned from Heather Alice Shea, she was like one of the teachers I've had. She wasn't the
Mm.
mentor, she was just a class that I took, is that you enter your intuition through your learning style. So the easiest
Mm.
way to tap into your intuition is to know what your learning style is and then use those gifts because you already have it. It's like Lee Harris says that like you've already greased the wheel with your abilities, like your gifts and your talents. So use what you've already got going on. So if you've got like an artistic thing you do or a mechanical thing you do, and all of a sudden like there are those dog, like not dog whisperers, but car whisperers, like those mechanics who just know what's wrong with a car, right? They're using their intuition
Mm.
for that.
Yeah.
And anybody who's really good at something and they're like, oh, they're like, genius level with whatever it is. I'm like, that's because they're stepping into their bliss of intuition with that. But you don't do that right away. You have to learn the mechanics. And
Mm.
so stepping in your learning style is one of the best ways to open your door. So if you know you're an auditory learner, you're going to listen for words. You're going to listen for thoughts. If you're visual, you're going to look for imaginations. Like you're going to look for images inside your head, like the imagination. And like all of a sudden you're like, why am I, what does this have to do with anything? And then you
Mm.
explore it and ask questions about it. Right. I one time was talking to somebody and there was a swimming pool in my head. And I was like, I don't know what the swimming pool is. Why the heck am I seeing a swimming pool? And eventually I figured out why I was seeing a swimming pool because I sat with it long enough for me to understand it.
Mm.
And then for kinesthenics, and I'm kinesthetic, you just know that you know, and you just have to start speaking it, which is really terrifying because it means opening your mouth and saying things without knowing what you're going to say.
Mm.
In that time period where I was believing for Jeff, that's what I call it, believing for Jeff, because I really thought I was going to marry this guy, Jeff.
Mm.
I had two things that were really going on. One, I was desperate to hear directions and I was desperate to hear. So it would tell me to get off the highway and I would get off the highway and I would wind up at the Barnes and Noble and he would be there. Or I would wind up at the Barnes and Noble and he wouldn't be there. But I would hear, get off, he'll be there. And I was right 20% of the time.
Mm.
The other thing I was trying to do at that time period was I was trying to shut off my brain and allow my voice to speak, which I have to tell you is incredibly hard. And I was trying to learn how to speak in tongues, like in the Bible, where everybody had a different language that was given to them from spirit. And I
Yeah.
was like, if it's a gift in the Bible, it's a gift for today. And so I'm going to figure out how to tap into this. And so I would like be in my car and I would just start like humming. And I'm like, maybe that'll help the gift of tongues come out. I'm like,
Mm.
I don't know how this works, right? And I was like, my brain, and then the second I would feel it rising up to talk, my brain would go, ooh, what are we gonna say? And it would shut it down.
Mm.
By the time I bumped into the mentor, I had already learned how to speak in tongues, and I had already realized I wasn't going to marry Jeff. So, like, those were past moments in my life. So I knew
Mm.
how to speak and allow myself just to talk. But when he said, I want you to go over there and I want you to share something with somebody, I'd be like, I don't know what to say. He's like, you won't until you get over there. And I was like, but I don't know what to say. And he's like, you won't until you get over there. So go over there now. And so I went over because I was told to go over.
Mm.
And then he's like, tell them something. And so one of the first words I ever gave to anybody in that position was I told somebody that they weren't reading their Bible as much as they were before. And they got really pissed at me. They were really angry. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. And then they started to explain that they were no longer reading for breath, that they were now reading for depth. And so they were only swallowing about 2 or 3 verses a day so that they could really like hunker in on what those 2 or 3 verses meant.
Mm.
And I went back to Steve, the mentor, and I was like, well, she told me I was dead wrong. And he's like, well, how were you wrong? And I was like, well, I told her she wasn't reading the Bible as much as she used to. And I was like, and now she's reading for depth rather than breadth. And he goes, Kim, she's not reading the Bible as much as she used to. She's only reading a couple of verses every day. That's not as much.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, but she told me I was wrong. She goes, she felt you were judging her for not reading the Bible as much instead of her just being seen that you're diving in deeper.
Mm.
There's like this level of perception of what you're giving to how it's received that I also had to overcome. Because sometimes you say something and somebody are like, well, that's not true. And then you're like, well, there's this, this, and this that I'm seeing. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess that is like, that's what's happening. Like in this case, like, yeah, you're not reading the Bible as much as you did. You might be spending as much time in the Bible as you were before, but you're not getting as many chapters in a day.
Right.
Right. And so, um, it's really been like a lesson in how to trust and just how to walk through it and being willing to be wrong. And I start with, if this doesn't resonate, let it fall off. If this doesn't you're not finding this helpful, forget it. I
Mm.
have a friend who, I mean, this is partly my left brain and this is partly her right brain or left brain. So this is partly circumstantial and this is partly my left brain. I have a friend, she wanted a reading, and I bumped into her and I told her a reading, and I was like, you're really looking for the guy. And then I was like, but wait, is she looking for a guy? I don't want to make the assumption, left brain, I don't want to make the assumption she's looking for a guy. She could be looking for a girl, right? Anything is possible. So I was like, wait, are you looking for a guy or a girl? And then she got really mad that I just didn't know if she was looking
Mm.
for a guy or a girl. And I was like, well, and so my left brain was like, you don't want to offend, like, don't make assumptions
Mm.
about people's preferences. Like, not everybody's hetero. Like, there are lots of people who are degrees of what's going on. Don't make, like, right. So I was sort of
Mm.
in that left brain, don't make assumptions. But I also very clearly heard, right, don't assume.
Mm.
And I find out later, as we're talking about this, she's been joking for years that she just needs to find a good woman because men are impossible to find. So she's
Mm.
been making this joke that she didn't mean about wanting to find a good woman. And I was like, you've been telling the universe for years in this joke that you're looking for a woman.
Mm.
And I was like, so I picked up on that. And she's like, okay, I'll stop making that joke. So
Yeah.
now she just tells the universe she's looking for a sugar daddy.
How do you, I guess, best separate, like if it's intuitive insight or it's insight that's coming more from fear or ego based decision?
When I'm reading for people, I can tell that it's not me, right? I know
Mm.
when it's not me. And I do know when it is me. So I know when my
Mm,
left brain is taken over, and I'm like, so I gave a reading at the expo I was at last weekend to somebody, and I was like, okay, this is the left brain part of me. The left brain part of me says you need to do this, this, this. My right
mm,
brain is in complete agreement of that. And
mm,
my artistic, intuitive side is like, yes, 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 even though it's left brain knowledge. Again, Heather Ellis Shea says they're combined. You can't separate the two. You've got a left brain and you have a right brain, right?
yeah.
Use them together, right? Don't be afraid to use them. For myself, I still bump into an intuitive pretty much every month because I'm working on growing, and I'm working on growing my ability to hear for myself, even. And
Mm,
so I do a monthly check in with her to make sure that what I'm hearing is accurate and that
mm,
I'm not off base at all. I also do a monthly check in with her to make sure that like I'm not walking in fear. And I know when I'm not
mm,
walking in fear because I have peace and I have calm and I know that everything's going to be okay. And when I am walking in fear, like when I'm holding on to something that I really, really, really want, and in the natural, I'm just not seeing it, that becomes like harder to navigate when I'm grasping onto something that I really want. Because in reality, that means I'm probably pushing it away. And I need to get myself into a place where I'm much more calm. And so if I'm walking in fear, I reach out to those that I know can support it and be like, hey, can you check these things for me and tell me if my fear is reasonable?
mm,
And I'll be honest, as an intuitive, I will also, if I'm walking in fear on something, I will go find out the truth as much as I can. So, like, and that I think I'm thinking mostly medical, right? If I have
mm,
an inkling of a fear of something, I'm like, I'm calling my doctor or I'll get myself in for a test. Like, if I have a fear about something, I will, like, do the appropriate things, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm pretty open about my medical stuff. I have a thyroid nodule that I think is like out of control and just giant and
Mm,
huge. And so I go to my endocrinologist every year. And I brought it up in my PCP appointment yesterday, and he was like, maybe we need a second opinion. And so I already have a second opinion with an ear, nose, throat person rather than an endocrinologist set up. And so I'm taking the active measures. So when I sit down with the PCP, when I sat down with my doctor yesterday, I was already in line. Like he's like, "What are you doing about it?" And I was like, "Well, I have the appointment at the end of August for it with the regular doctor, but I made a second opinion with somebody else in a different like there's two where I live, there are two main medical facilities kind of. There's like
mhm,
the one that's close to where I live, and then there's another one that's like housed downtown Philadelphia, and they have branches that they just keep branching out. So I went to the other one, the one that's housed in downtown Philadelphia. Um, that's the one my primary care physician is in. And so he mentioned the doctor. He's like, "Are you going to see this doctor?" And I said, "Yes, I'm going to see that doctor on the 28th." And he said, "Great. Tell me what she says." And he said, "And then we'll go from there." And I knew based on the way he was talking that he has concern about it.
mm,
Do I have concern about it? Yes. Do I think it's a big problem? No. Do I think it'll be okay? Yeah. Does it mean I might have to have surgery? Maybe, right? Like I'm hopeful
mm,
not. But I'm taking the appropriate actions that go with it. And I'm not just sitting on my fear. I'm taking what they call right action.
mm.
And I'm just following it to its conclusion to make sure that I can get the peace I need. I'm not taking action that's based on fear, though. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It does.
I'm taking right action about it.
Do you feel like are there certain rituals or practices that you have to kind of get you aligned and help you strengthen your intuition, or something anyone can do that can help them?
Yeah, I am a big believer. The thing that got me to intuition is meditation.
Mm,
And I will say meditation is different than prayer. A lot of people are like, if I
mm,
pray, I'm meditating. And I would say yes and no. And I have spent years
mm,
in prayer and my anxiety levels were off the chart.
mm,
I've spent years in meditation and I'm no longer on anti-anxiety medicines. It's a lovely side effect that of meditation that some people, I didn't go into meditation to get that side effect.
Mm,
Because if you go into meditation to calm your anxiety, it's not going to actually work. You have to go into
mm,
meditation for meditation, and then you get the lovely side
mm.
effect. The purpose really
Yeah.
matters, right?
Yeah.
And so I spend 30 minutes a day in meditation at least. And then on weekends, I try to get an hour. And if I've got a really yummy day, I get 2 hours in. And I find that opportunity to rise above my thoughts. This is the way I meditate. It's taken me a long time to do this, and it's taken a lot of practice. But
Mm,
my thoughts run like a stream below my, so if I have a couple of layers inside my head, right? My thoughts run like a stream, and then I am a watcher above my thoughts.
mm.
Don't ask me who's the watcher. I just know the watcher is there, right? My thoughts are
Yeah.
running, and then I watch my thoughts run. And then I realize they're just thoughts, right? I can
Mm,
attach to some of them and think that they're really important, but really, in all honesty, it's just a thought. And then I sit above my thoughts. And so when an anxiety thought comes in, I'm like, oh, I'm having an anxiety thought. And I watch it now. And because I'm a meditator, when an anxiety a moment happens in my body, I watch the reactions instead of getting caught up in them and snowballed, and then they, like, they build on each other. When an
mm,
anxiety reaction occurs, I actually take a watcher position. Like I'm in my body, but I'm not fully, like, I'm in my body, but I'm watching my body react. I embody it, I feel it, I acknowledge it, but I also recognize that it's just a feeling. And within a
mm.
couple of minutes, it passes.
So your intention is not really to clear all your thoughts. It's mostly become an observer. Because I think that's where
Yeah.
some people get frustrated. It's like they feel like meditation, the intention. I mean, I know there's a lot of different types of meditation, but
Yes.
the first one people think of is like, I have to clear my head, and then they sit down and then they get frustrated how there's so many thoughts going through your head and you're trying to clear it. But
That's a line that I actually said in my talk last week when I was talking about all of this. I was like, if you're alive, you have thoughts.
yeah,
You are never going to get rid of your thoughts. The only way to get rid of your thoughts is when you die. Like, that is it. That is the only time
uh,
you get rid of your thoughts. If you are a breathing human being existing on planet Earth, maybe even existing in outer space, I'm not like, right? That's as far as we've gotten so far.
yeah,
I don't know, maybe one day with if you're on Mars and you're a human being, you will have thoughts that you can't shut up. Like, that is the human experience.
yeah.
You will always have thoughts, even when you're trying to get rid of them. It's a matter of letting your thoughts, I don't know, it's like Descartes who says, I think, therefore I am. And I'm
Mm,
like, no, I might think, but those thoughts do not necessarily make up who I am. I
mm.
just watch them go by.
And do you feel like after 15, like when you do an extended meditation, it's a little bit better than doing like a 15-minute meditation?
So, good question. The University of Pennsylvania has done a study that basically says if you meditate, I don't know why the magic number is 26, but they found the number is 26. If you meditate for 26 minutes a day, it will have a positive impact on your physical and mental presence.
Mm,
So 15 minutes is good. If that's all you can get, great. Get your 15 minutes, right? It'll have benefits, right? But if you want the best possible benefits you can get, you want to go for at least 26 minutes. At least scientifically, that's what the University of Pennsylvania says. For me, during the pandemic, when everything slowed down, I have to say everybody else was freaking out. I finally got rid of my FOMO. Like, I felt like everybody else was out partying, and then I was at home doing weird things like meditating and sitting around and not drinking, right? And so I finally felt like I wasn't missing out on anything, that I wasn't a weirdo because nobody was doing anything, right?
yeah.
And so I started to meditate an hour a day. And Esther and Jerry Hicks, they talk about getting into what they call the vortex.
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza calls it the field. So does Chris Duncan. I
Mm.
think Chris Duncan got it from Joe Dispenza. But those two call it the field, and Esther, Jerry Hicks, and Abraham, they call it the vortex. And
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna find the vortex. I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna find it. And I found it, and it's actually what Sanskrit calls samadhi. It's like
Mm.
the reason you do yoga, the whole reason you do yoga, I don't know if you all know this, but the whole reason you do yoga is for the last pose, corpse pose.
Mm.
So that when you finally get into corpse pose, you have pushed your body and your mind so far that when you lie down in corpse, it all just quiets and you find the
Mm.
field. You find the vortex. That is why yoga happens, is to get you to the vortex. And I was like, I'm going to find the vortex. And so I would meditate for like an hour, and I would be like, I'm going to get there. And the last 10 minutes would turn into this really yummy open space. It would just
Mm.
feel like a space of infinite possibility. Chris Duncan calls it feeling innocence. I don't know if that's it. I feel like body and mind separate a little bit in this space. I feel like it's the space of like, I can do anything. There have been times when I'm trying to get there that I would like literally be standing on the top of, not literally, but figuratively, I would like imagination wise, I would see myself standing on top of a mountain and I would jump off the mountain and start to fly. At that point, I would be like, and I flew into the vortex.
Mm.
And so it's a place where you feel supported and calm and peaceful and loved. I no longer need to meditate for an hour to get myself into the vortex. I can get
Mm.
myself in the vortex in 5 minutes now, less than 5 minutes. Sometimes I can sit down in meditation and I'm immediately in the vortex. What I find very funny is that when I'm in meditation, things will happen around me and I won't even notice. Lights will turn off, alarms will go off on my phone, right? And I won't even, lights will come on because I have some lights on timers in my house, like, right? And I won't see it, I won't know it, I won't have heard it because I am not on this plane anymore. I am somewhere in between. And that is the space of infinite possibility. Esther Hicks says throw everything you want to create in the vortex when you get there.
Mm.
Anything you want to see in your life, she's like, just add it to the vortex when you get there. And it took me an hour of meditating during the pandemic regularly to get in the vortex. And it's just a practice. And she used to say all the time that it doesn't take long, it takes 5 minutes to get there. You only need to be in there for 5 minutes. And I would be like, I can't even get in there in 5 minutes. She's like, it doesn't take long. And I'd be like, what is she talking about? It takes forever. And now I get it because I'm now in a space where I've practiced it so much, my body goes, oh, we're just going to do this thing now. Let's go do this thing.
Mm.
And at first, with my completely analytical mind, that took me like 6 months to probably more like a year to learn how to speak in tongues, right? Of constantly learning, like trying every day for at least 20 minutes a day to make it work, right? It
Mm.
took me a long time to find the vortex and then to live in it and seep in it. And now it's easy to get into, but it wasn't at first.
Yeah, I think I like that you mentioned the whole yoga thing and meditation because I feel like when I do meditate after yoga, I don't know why it is, but that is like the easiest meditation ever. It's like you
Yes.
don't even, there's just no mind chatter. There's not even a lot of thoughts. And it's like when I
No.
walk out of that session, feel like I'm floating, like I'm a little
Yes.
bit lighter. I'm
Yes.
like, what is this?
That's you what that is you have hit exactly what yoga is supposed to be and do.
Yeah.
Most people get into yoga because they think it's going to help their body, and it is. Don't get me wrong. It
Yeah, I was
totally is.
sweating.
It's a way, yeah, it's a way of like strengthening your body. But yoga was originally used to get people to be able to be in the headspace that you talk about
Mm.
at the end.
Yeah. You think you're going in there for this like relaxing thing, and it's like I had some tough yoga teachers, so there it was it's like it kicks your butt. So by the time you're ready to meditate afterwards, it's like there's not a lot of chatter. It's just
Yeah.
relax.
I will also say I would love to be in a yoga class where you are in yoga for an hour and then
Mm.
they roll you right into a meditation class for an hour.
Yeah.
Right? I would love that.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned a few of my favorites. I love Joe Dispenza and Esther. And I think Joe's the one who mentioned that the power of meditation and how like it I think they scientifically proved that it grows your telomere glands,
Yep.
which extends your life. So
Oh.
there's
It
more
also like
benefits.
activates your pineal gland.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, cool stuff.
it is
Are
cool stuff.
there I know you mentioned a couple of mentors, but are there like books or different
Mhm.
influence in this community that helped you in your path?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Um, so a book that definitely did it was The Law of Attraction by Esther and Jerry Hicks.
Mm,
And then I read Ask and It Is Given by them, and I applied the principles for something very specific, a very large sum of money, like a very large sum of money, and it happened.
mm.
And so, yeah, those two books, Ask and It Is Given and The Law of Attraction, and follow the activities, even though they seem silly, because I followed some of the activities and Ask and It Is Given, and doors just opened.
Mm.
Um, Joe Dispenza's How to Break the Habit of Being Yourself, or Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself,
Yeah, breaking the habits of being yourself.
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. There's a book and there's also a CD meditation of him in that. And I will tell you, Joe Dispenza's meditations, they're a little weird, right? They're a little weird. Like he talks weird and they just, they're weird. And so, like, if you're like one of those people that's used to normal, this might feel uncomfortable. I'll just own that. And because at
Mm.
first I was like, I don't know what I think of just Joe Dispenza thing. But I have to tell you, the Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself meditation CD opened the book for me in a brand new way. And I was doing that meditation. I would say I did it every night for a year.
Mm.
I'm sorry, every night for like a month. I don't know where a year came from. Maybe a month, maybe 2 months. But I mean, even now I'm like, why haven't I done that in a while? Right? Like
Mm.
there's something really yummy about that hour-long meditation that he brings you into
Mm.
in breaking the habit of being yourself. Um, uh I have conflicting feelings about the author of the universe. What is it? The Universe Has Your Back.
I feel
And
like I've
their
heard of
Super
that.
Attractor is also by Gabby Bernstein. The books themselves are beautiful and wonderful and very helpful. I find her stuff, her writing to be supportive. And I mean, she's very real about her life experiences and her struggles. And I appreciate that about her as well. So,
Do you feel like there's like working on yourself, doing shadow work and things like that, eliminating past traumas that has value in strengthening your intuition or any of your spiritual abilities?
so remember that Jeff guy I was talking about before?
Mm-hmm.
I really liked Jeff in on one level. On another
Mm.
level, I didn't like Jeff at all. He
Mm.
was sarcastic, he was moody, he was unkind. He would like tell stories that made himself really important. He In short, he was a lot like my dad's second wife. And I knew dad wouldn't like him at all. And so he was somebody that I knew, though. His personality was a known, like my stepmom.
Mm.
And so I was like recreating a bad relationship because it was a known relationship. Like we create patterns in our life because of traumas we've been through.
Mm. Yeah.
And so was Jeff ever supposed to be my guy? No, he really wasn't. And was I ever supposed to be with him? No, I really wasn't. Did I want to be? Yeah, because he was comfortable and he was known and he was edgy and he was like all these things, right?
Yeah.
Did my intuition use that? Absolutely. To grow me and to change me and to make me into somebody who can hear my intuition? Yes, it totally used the circumstances.
Mm.
Did I pick those circumstances because Jeff was known? Probably. Was I recreating my trauma? Yeah, I really was. And so, intuition, which is helping us see outside the box and helping us see outside of our patterns and helping us imagine a life that we wouldn't normally imagine, and giving us hope when we normally might not have it. And meditation, which takes you out of yourself and puts you in no space, right? I think all of that is what creates healing.
Yeah.
Meditation and intuition, I believe, can heal trauma. Because
Interesting perspective.
meditation is acceptance of whatever is present. Meditation, when I do it, like my thoughts fly through and I just watch them, it's accepting whatever thoughts are flying through. And that includes any memories or history or trauma that flies through. And just be like, yeah, that happened. That sucks. I'm really sorry that sucked. Like, I love you. I'm sorry that sucked. I love you. I love you. And that is not you. That happened to you, but that does not define who you are. And meditation puts me in a space where I can see the trauma, but I don't have to latch onto it and attach to it and make it a belief. And I'm able to let go of some of those tentacles that hold on to those beliefs. And so those drop off.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Well, Kim, it's been a really great and
So lovely
enlightening
meeting you.
conversation.
Yes.
Before we close it out, can you tell the audience a little bit about your services and anywhere they can find you?
Absolutely. So I'm Kim Beam. I'm at kimbeam.com. So I make the joke like I don't drink alcohol, really. I really don't. But my mom named me Kim Beam like Jim Beam. So if that helps you find me, right? Kimbeam.com. I have a podcast called Intuitive Insights with Kim Beam, where I will give a free 15-minute reading, intuitive reading on the podcast. So if you're looking for a reading, come find me, sign up for a podcast, and I will give you an intuitive reading. You can find me on my podcast, on my website for coaching. So I'll come alongside. I think it's like 8 sessions that we plan for to begin with, right? To help you. And we can do those like once a month. We can do them once a week. We can do them every other week. Like you get to decide how quickly and how often you want to meet with me to help you along as you find your intuition and learn how to walk in it. And then I also offer sessions on my website anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. So
Yeah, that's an interesting format for a podcast. I was listening to it earlier. Might try it.
I'd love to have you on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. And I tell people when they come on for the podcast, I tell them, I said, if I say anything that you don't want exposed, right, on video or on audio, let me know and we'll cut that part so that
Yeah.
it's just between you and me if you feel like that exposes you too much and I've read your mail. But my biggest thing when I do a podcast, and I'm giving people either way, whenever I'm giving a reading, whether it's on the podcast or it's in like, you've paid me for it. And that is my job is to encourage you.
Mm.
My job is not to leave you in a space where you're feeling worried about something. My job is to see the energy of what is possible and help you imagine how to open those doors.
Mm.
And so my goal is for you to feel encouraged and excited rather than seen and shamed. God, no, never shamed, because that's a terrible feeling. And who
Yeah.
wants
Yeah, I'm a pretty open book. I like to be open on my podcast because I think that kind of helps the audience anyways.
I agree. Like there's some stuff I even talked about today that I was like, oh, like maybe we should put that back in the hiding, shadow it up. But at the same point, like I can't leave my garbage in the shadow. Like you don't
Yeah.
learn, everybody needs to hear the truth in order to grow themselves. And so I really believe in vulnerability and I believe in authenticity.
Yeah, especially when you're in the space of light work or intuitive coach or anything like that. I feel like you were supposed to use your life experiences for, helping others, being an
Agreed.
example. So,
100%.
yeah,
Yes. And I mean, we all go through it. And to say you don't go through it is a big fat baloney lie, right?
yeah.
Because if you're, again, if you're alive and human and on Earth, I mean, you might be in outer space and you might one day be on Mars, but like if you're alive and human and on Earth, you came here for physical experiences, and
Hmm.
not all of those experiences are good.
Yeah.
They're not all good, but
Yeah.
they all have a reason and a purpose. And when I got Hodgkin's, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's. When I got Hodgkin's, I was like, there's nothing good going to come out of this. Nothing good is going to come out of chemo. And I told dad there's nothing good about chemo. And my dad was like, well, chemo gave me back you. So yeah, there's plenty of good about chemo. And I'll also say, if I have to point to the single most influential and the point that had the biggest impact, it was going through Hodgkin's. It is the point where everything pivoted. It's the moment when everything changed in my life.
Mm.
So yeah, our sucky moments suck.
Yeah, but they're the biggest teachers, though.
They do. They really are.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great conversation, Kim. And for the listeners, you can find Kim's information in the description, and you can always find ours in the description. You can find us on any podcast platform. If you'd like to be a guest, email americangypsy@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Peace.